It's time for the Las Vegas Sportsline. Brought to you by Caesars Entertainment, where every guest is treated like Caesar and every visit is unforgettable.
Here we go. It's the Wednesday edition of the Las Vegas Sportsline. It's our Caesars Entertainment Wednesday. That means Jeff Davis is with us, Director of Trading for Caesars. Teddy Covers is here. I'm Dave Cokin. Ari Platinum's our producer. And we are ready to go. All right, Jeff, let me bring you right in here, and we'll get things started. We are both New Englanders. Teddy is not.
Nope.
So there's two smiling faces in this conversation right now with the Bruins putting together a dominant performance in Game 1. Let's talk about that and what we've got coming up in Game 2 and beyond.
You know, Dave, the Bruins were pretty stale the first 8 or 10 minutes of Game 1. 10-day layoff really showed. The Blues were a step faster, but I don't know if it was maybe the second TV timeout. The last 50 minutes of that game was one-way traffic. Boston played probably their best game of the entire playoffs since maybe Game 6 against Toronto when their backs were against the wall. Complete performance. St. Louis didn't come with their best either, and frankly, it was probably a miracle that game was still 2-2 going to the third period, and St. Louis still had every chance. Tonight, I would expect a better effort out of St. Louis. They really didn't come with their best in Game 1, and it's hard to expect that Boston can play as good as they did, so I would expect a more evenly played game tonight.
Yeah, I guess the comment I would offer is that the Blues actually, this could have been like an 8-1 game. One of the St. Louis goals was a fluke on a really bad play by Pasternak and with a blind pass behind his own goal. He's actually not the first time he's done that in the playoffs, and I suspect he won't do that again. That led to a goal. The Bruins also hit 2 posts along the way. This was a mismatch. The problem I see for St. Louis is that they're a zone-to-zone type team. They're not explosive. They're not a good transition team. They've never been a good transition team at any point this season. That's not their style of play. They have to be really physical. And if the officials call them the way they called them in Game 1, that does not suit St. Louis well. They've got to find a way to slow the Bruins down in their transition, and the only way to do that is to be physical. And, that leads to penalties sometimes. So I don't know I hesitate to say this, but I can see this being a 4-0 sweep.
Not out of the realm of possibility. I would expect St. Louis to get one somewhere. You're right in terms of Boston having a far better transition game than St. Louis. One thing that St. Louis lacks that Boston does not is overall team speed, and it was clearly shown in Game 1. Again, I expect more out of St. Louis tonight, but maybe you're right. If they don't stay out of the box, the Bruins' power play has been incredible.
Well, I mean, the Bruins are 4-0 when they get 5 power play chances or more, 6-1 when they get 4 power play chances or more. So staying out of the box has to be a priority for the Blues tonight if they're going to hang around in this one.
Well,
absolutely. I mean, the penalty that I believe it was Sundqvist took, the cross-check on the boards was just mindless. And if the Blues are going to have any chance, they can't take those penalties.
Let's talk about the prices. Where's the series odds at this point? And what are we looking at in Game 2?
Bruins are now -$3 to win this series, and if you watch Game 1, they're every bit of -$3. We're pretty heavy on Boston, somewhat by design based on our futures liability that we've talked about in previous shows.
Yep.
Game 2 tonight, Bruins -$1.65. Ticket count's pretty even. You've got, half the public thinking that maybe the Blues come with a better effort and they're looking at a nice price, and the other half thinking, well, it's going to be more of the same. We have twice as much money on Boston. The bigger money has come in on Boston.
All right. Well, we'll see how it plays out. I know what I'm hoping for. And it's not me, but one of my best friends has a 16-1 futures ticket on the Bruins. So I know what he's rooting for, and I'll get a couple of dinners out of that. So, New England has got to stick together on this one.
Yeah, therefore, if you're getting free food out of it, therefore you're rooting for it.
Yeah, and good food, too. He knows his restaurants. All right, let's talk basketball. The Warriors and Raptors, the series will get underway sometime before this year comes to an end. Man, they take some long breaks in that league. And it really is kind of a fascinating series because I think there's a sense that Golden State, now I'm not saying this is the case, I'm just saying this is the sense, that there's some vulnerability in the Warriors and that maybe Toronto has enough to pull it off. Is that the way the betting market is approaching this?
Not remotely.
Okay.
We opened Golden State -1 in Game 1, and we took some sharp Raptor money right away, and the number flipped to Toronto -1. And now the market is a mix of pick and Toronto -1. If we're taking a Raptors bet now, we have to give it away. The public is just avalanching Golden State, and I figure that to be the case in every game this series. We're going to be big Raptors fans, and I would expect it to continue. The future book, two of our better results, best possible result for two teams getting in outside of Utah and Philadelphia. So opposite of the hockey, that has worked out well for us.
So here's the question I've got, because I'm not surprised to hear that in terms of what the market is doing, especially with the Game 1 line. Why was the line set where it was, knowing, I think having to know in advance that you're going to get a ton of Warriors money? This reminds me somewhat of, I don't know, kind of reminds me of the Alabama-Clemson, where it's like, I mean, the sharp market is going to just pound Clemson, and I think the public might end up doing the same thing. And we saw this in the NCAA basketball tournament as well a couple of times. So I'm a little baffled as to why this number appeared where it did.
Likewise, and I expected the series price to be a lot higher. -$3 seems light to me. We in the office kind of thought it was going to be closer to $4 at the start of the Toronto-Milwaukee series. Maybe Toronto showed enough to bring that price down a little bit. But we've taken a lot of Golden State and Toronto series money. That price is almost, or let me rephrase that, the amount of money bet on that is almost even. As far as the game goes, I expected it to open a little higher, but I guess I was wrong because the sharp money poured in on Toronto. So this is just going to be one of those classic pros versus Joe's game, and the house is going to be on the sharp side, and it's generally not a bad place to be.
The reference I actually meant to make was on the Patriots-Rams Super Bowl, where I'll think this to my death. The opening line of that game was horrible. It was just absolutely. I tweeted at halftime of the Patriots-Kansas City game, Patriots should be 2.5. That's the right line in the Super Bowl, and they opened the other team the favorite. It's like you're going to get overwhelmed with action on one side here, and that's the way I kind of saw this Golden State thing. I thought the Warriors, particularly tonight, Warriors -2.5 on the road to me was the right price.
Yeah, again, I would tend to agree, and the public would tend to agree, but the sharp people, they don't agree because they took the one with Toronto instantaneously. And if you look across the board, the places that generally deal a sharper line are still dealing Toronto -1. So, sometimes you just got to throw your hands up in the air and accept what you see.
But here's my argument on that. The sharp market's always going to play the number, always, and I don't care what they do on a regular season game. Very important, but in an NBA Finals Game 1, I mean the public volume is way higher than it's going to be on any normal game, and to me, I want to set a line where the public's going to just come in with both. I want to take all their money. Okay, so that's what I'm going to set the number.
Last series of the year to do it.
Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah, I mean, I guess you're right, Dave. The public would have a little bit more pull in this because, again, the handle in the NBA Finals is far greater than any non-football event there is. So yeah, we're pretty avalanched on the Warriors, and we're at pick when a lot of the sharp places are at -1 and. Maybe the number comes back to Golden State -1, but I just don't think it's going to go that much further.
Well, I mean, supposedly the sharp money was on the Rams in the Super Bowl, even though the early bets were on New England, when that line first came out. It's not unusual to see the sharp money on some wrong side sometimes.
Especially in the postseason, where their approach, in my opinion, is not as sound as it is in the regular season. That to me is where the analytics guys do so well, because over a long-term haul, like a regular season in any sport, if you're playing numbers, you do well. I think in the postseason, that's not the way. To me, in my opinion, it's never been the way to beat the postseason, and I think I'm right on that. I think it's a different animal altogether.
Yeah, and the one thing that's always, to your point, Dave, that's always been a little bit confusing to me is if these sharp guys that are playing the number know that the public, in a market that the public might drive a little bit more than normal, is going to smash Golden State, why show your hand early? Why not let the places go to 1.5 or 2 before you jump in? That's just something I've never understood and have just always shaken my head at.
And the answer to that on some level is that the sharps are in competition against one another as well. And if somebody fires, somebody else is going to fire because, now the markets are moving. But certainly, I mean, for game one, there's something to be said for a 10-day layoff mattering.
Oh, sure.
For Golden State. That's a long time by NBA standards. That being said, from a series standpoint, when you see the team returning back for second, third, fourth tries at a title, and they've won them before, those teams tend to win, unless they're old. Like the Lakers team that lost to the Pistons. That was just, they were old and had chemistry problems up and down that roster. Unless it's a situation like that.
Major chemistry problems. That was when Shaq and Kobe were not getting along at all.
Let alone Malone and Peyton were on that team. That was a... You ever read Phil Jackson's book on that season? It's a good read. But anyhow, with those exceptions, the teams that have won the year before and they make it back to the finals tend to win again.
All right, let's move to the world of golf. And sometimes the course dictates what you should play. And boy, the shot makers were out in force last week at that tournament. Now we get a little more length involved. More, I guess this is similar to the Masters at Augusta, not in terms of the magnitude, but in terms of the type of course it is. So do we go back to looking for the bombers at the Memorial?
This is one of my favorite events. And talking about course correlation, doing some research, I found it's incredibly correlated to another course in Ohio, Firestone Country Club, which held the Bridgestone Invitational through last year. That tournament will no longer be available. But Tiger's won at both places. Hideki Matsuyama's won at both places. Kyle Stanley lost in the playoff at the Memorial last year, and he finished second at Firestone. Lots of correlation. So if you're looking for guys to play this week, one thing you could do is look up and down the Bridgestone Invitational leaderboard the last few years. Very long course, real scoreable par fives this week, so everybody should be able to get the par fives. The fairways aren't super difficult to hit, but the rough is very penal. They grow the rough very long. Water in play on 11 holes, so hitting the fairways is very important as you're going to have to be able to make good approach shots into these greens. The greens are very undulated, very difficult greens this week. What that does is it tends to bring the field together in terms of not being as big of a gap between the best putters and the worst putters. Plenty of bad putters have won here. Plenty of long shots have won here. The last 5 winners have all been higher than 50-1. If you look back, DeChambeau, Duffner, McGirt, Lingmerth, and Matsuyama were your last 5 winners. Ben On, also a guy who can't putt. He lost in a playoff last year. So when you're looking at guys this week, don't worry too much about guys who can't putt because they can win here this week.
Hang on, you just said the last 5 winners have all been priced at 50-1 or better. What type of player do we got this year at 50-1 or better that I want my money on right now?
I'll throw one out. I didn't play him yet, but Luke List, this guy's coming on, and he's in the 70-1 range, I believe.
He is, and I'm looking at 2 guys in the long range prices that their game tends to fit. The first one's Kyle Stanley. When he's on, he's one of the best tee to green guys out here. Last 4 starts at the Memorial, he's finished in the top 6 3 times. And like I mentioned, he lost in a playoff last year. Finished 8th at the Wells Fargo 2 starts back, which is another longer course. 75-1 surely fits the bill. Then you want to go super long. Looking at Corey Connors, 150-1. He's first on tour in proximity to the hole and 15th on tour in strokes gained off the tee, which those 2 things are going to be very important this week. Again, he can't putt, but that's neutralized some this week. So those are the 2 guys I'm looking at in terms of long shot.
Let's talk some of the favored guys. Rory McIlroy is the favorite. If you're looking at history on the course and current form.